The soft glow of Manhattan's lights filtered through the blinds of Jimmy Fallon's Upper West Side apartment. It was nearly midnight, that precious window of calm between the frenetic energy of taping The Tonight Show and the early morning prep work that would begin again all too soon. Jimmy scrolled through his phone, his features illuminated by the blue light as he reviewed tomorrow's guest list. Jennifer Lawrence, promoting her latest film. A musical performance by The Weeknd, standard fare for America's beloved late-night host. The notification dropped silently from the top of his screen, a brief flutter that he almost missed. iCloud security alert. New device access. Jimmy frowned, tapping it quickly. He hadn't logged into anything new. Before he could investigate further, his screen went black. "What the?" he muttered, pressing the power button repeatedly. The device remained unresponsive for several seconds before suddenly lighting up again, displaying his home screen as if nothing had happened. Across town, in a cramped apartment in Brooklyn, Elliot Chen sat hunched over 3 monitors, his face bathed in the artificial glow of screens filled with code. At 26, he possessed the technical brilliance that major tech companies coveted, but lacked the conventional credentials they required. College dropouts with genius-level coding abilities were romanticized in Silicon Valley mythology, but in reality, doors remained firmly closed without the right degrees or connections. "I'm in," Elliot whispered to himself, fingers dancing across the keyboard with practiced precision. On his center screen, a perfect replica of Jimmy Fallon's phone interface appeared, mirroring every tap, scroll, and interaction in real time. It had taken 3 months of methodical work to identify the vulnerability in the entertainment company's network that allowed this unprecedented access. He hadn't started with malicious intent. His original goal was to document the security flaw and submit it through proper channels, maybe even leverage it into a legitimate cybersecurity position. But desperation has a way of rewriting moral boundaries. With rent past due and his mother's medical bills mounting, the potential value of a celebrity's private data had become increasingly difficult to ignore. Elliot navigated through Jimmy's apps with the detached curiosity of someone browsing a museum exhibit. Emails to producers, text exchanges with family, photos of his wife and children, calendar entries marked private that detailed therapy appointments and family obligations carefully arranged around his punishing schedule. The humanity reflected in these digital fragments made Elliot's stomach tighten uncomfortably. This wasn't some faceless corporation. This was someone's life, messy, complex, and unexpectedly relatable. The boundary between ethical hacking and criminal invasion suddenly seemed less academic than it had a few hours ago. As he moved through the contacts list, a name caught his attention. Marcus Winters, do not answer. The entry stood out among the alphabetically organized celebrities, colleagues, and family members. Elliot hesitated, his cursor hovering over the name. Professional curiosity and personal desperation formed a dangerous alchemy in his mind. Before he could reconsider, Jimmy's phone began to ring. The host glanced down, expecting to see his producer's name. They often had last-minute changes to discuss. Instead, an unfamiliar number flashed on the screen. Normally, he'd let unknown callers go to voicemail, but something, intuition or simply the disruption of routine, made him answer. "Hello?" In Brooklyn, Elliot froze. He hadn't initiated a call, yet on his screen he could see the active connection between Jimmy's phone and another number. Someone else was in the system. Jimmy Fallon, a digitally altered voice, responded. "Interesting choice of password. Your daughter's birthday? Bit basic for someone with so much to protect." Jimmy's pulse quickened. Who is this? Someone with access to everything. Your emails, your texts, those photos from the NBC party that never made it to social media. Quite the candid collection. "What do you want?" Jimmy kept his voice steady, years of improvisational training kicking in despite the adrenaline now coursing through his system. 500,000 Bitcoin. You have 24 hours before your private conversations with Marcus Winters become very public. The name hit Jimmy like a physical blow. Marcus Winters, his former writing partner from his early comedy days. The relationship that had dissolved into a legal battle over stolen material and bitter accusations that both men had sworn to leave in the past. Look, I don't know who you are, but 24 hours, Jimmy. I'll send instructions. The line went dead. In Brooklyn, Elliot stared at his screen in horror. Someone had not only beaten him to the exploit, but was using it for straight-up extortion. Worse, they'd somehow detected his presence in the system. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Nice try, amateur. Stay out of my way or you're next." The night that had begun as an exercise in technical skill had suddenly become something far more dangerous. And Jimmy Fallon wasn't the only one who had been compromised. The NBC studios hummed with their usual pre-show energy, a choreographed chaos of production assistants, writers and technicians moving with practiced efficiency. Jimmy sat in his dressing room, makeup complete, his external demeanor betraying none of the tension that had kept him awake through the night. 3 hours until broadcast, 18 hours until the hacker's deadline, and no clear path forward. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. 5 minutes until rehearsal, Jimmy, his assistant called. "Thanks, I'll be right there," he responded, voice steady despite the turmoil beneath. 6 years of hosting The Tonight Show had perfected his ability to compartmentalize, to navigate the spotlight while keeping certain parts of himself in shadow. But this threat reached into those carefully guarded spaces, threatening to expose conversations that could damage more than just his public image. His phone buzzed again. The third anonymous message since morning. Payment details attached. Tick-tock. Making his way to the stage, Jimmy moved through the familiar routine on autopilot, his mind calculating options. Paying would set a precedent, potentially inviting future demands. Going to the police would make everything public. The network's security team would be obligated to report the breach, creating exactly the media circus the blackmailer was threatening. "Let's take it from the top," the director called, and Jimmy launched into his monologue with practiced ease. The audience of staff laughing at jokes he delivered without fully registering. The professional mask held firm, but beneath it, options narrowed with each passing hour. In Brooklyn, Elliot hadn't slept either. The threatening message had sent him into a spiral of paranoia and guilt. He'd spent the night erasing his digital footprints, then researching everything he could find about Jimmy Fallon and Marcus Winters. Their history was mostly industry gossip, former writing partners who had a falling out around 2004, just before Fallon's career had truly taken off. Nothing scandalous enough to warrant $500,000 in hush money. Whatever was in those messages, it wasn't public knowledge. And whatever threat the other hacker posed to Elliot himself was real enough to make his hands shake as he poured his third cup of coffee. "This is insane," he muttered to himself, pacing his small apartment. He had 3 options. Walk away completely, try to warn Fallon, or attempt to identify the primary hacker. Self-preservation argued for the first, conscience for the second, professional pride for the third. His mother's voice echoed in his memory. "Our choices reveal who we truly are, Elliot, not our circumstances." She'd said it when he'd dropped out of MIT, and again when he'd considered less ethical coding jobs during particularly lean months. Decision made, he opened his laptop and began composing an email to Jimmy Fallon's personal account, the one not managed by assistants or the network. The message was direct. "Your phone has been compromised. There are at least 2 people with access, me and someone else. I'm not the one asking for money. I can help if you're willing to meet, Central Park, Bethesda Fountain, 3 p.m. today. I'll be wearing a red MIT hoodie." He hesitated before hitting send, knowing this could be interpreted as part of the extortion scheme or a separate threat entirely. Adding a final line, he wrote, "As proof, I'm not your blackmailer. The messages with Marcus Winters include mentions of someone named Sarah and a project called Midnight Hour. I don't know what these mean, but I suspect the other hacker does." Elliot pressed send, then immediately began preparing for what would likely be either an ambush by security or no meeting at all. The likelihood of Jimmy Fallon actually showing up seemed astronomically small. Yet at 3:05 p.m., as Elliot sat on the edge of the Bethesda fountain, a figure in sunglasses and a baseball cap approached, hands in the pockets of a nondescript grey jacket, casual enough to blend in with tourists, but with a purposeful stride that caught Elliot's attention. Immediately. "MIT, Jimmy said quietly, nodding toward Elliot's red hoodie. "Good school. Why aren't you using that education somewhere legitimate?" Elliot stood, heart racing. "I could ask why a successful talk show host has messages he's willing to pay $500,000 to keep private." They regarded each other with mutual wariness, two strangers connected by digital intrusion and shared vulnerability. Around them, tourists snapped photos of the famous fountain, oblivious to the tension between the young hacker and the celebrity in disguise. "I'm not paying anyone," Jimmy finally said, "and I'm not here to trade accusations. You said you could help." "I can," Elliot nodded, choosing his words carefully. "But I need to understand what we're dealing with. Those messages with Winters, they're important enough for someone to commit multiple felonies to get them." "Why?" Jimmy's expression remained carefully neutral. "That's not relevant to stopping this person." "It is if we want to understand their motivation," Elliot countered. "Blackmailers choose targets and leverage points strategically. This isn't random." A silence stretched between them, filled with the ambient sounds of the park, children laughing, water splashing, distant traffic. Finally, Jimmy spoke, his voice pitched low. "Marcus and I wrote together before SNL. We had a show concept that networks were interested in, potentially career-making. Creative differences led to a split that wasn't amicable. Words were exchanged that neither of us meant. And now he's successful too," Elliot observed. "Executive producer on 3 hit shows." Jimmy nodded. "Our conversations from that time include things that would damage both our reputations. Things said in anger, accusations about each other's talent, comments about network executives who now control both our careers. It was 15 years ago, but context doesn't matter in viral sound bites." Elliot processed this, seeing the full picture take shape. "So this isn't just about embarrassing you. It's about destroying a relationship that's taken years to repair." A flash of surprise crossed Jimmy's features. "How did you—" "Your recent Instagram posts. 3 photos with Winters at industry events in the past year. Body language shows reconciliation, not ongoing tension. You've mended things privately, but publicly it's still perceived as a rivalry. Someone wants to reopen those wounds." Jimmy studied the young man with new interest. "For someone who breaks into phones, you're surprisingly perceptive about human relationships." "Technology is predictable. People are the real puzzles," Elliot replied, then hesitated. "I can track this person potentially, but it means maintaining my access to your phone, which means I have to trust someone who's already invaded my privacy." "Ironic, isn't it?" Elliot offered a small, nervous smile. "But unlike your blackmailer, I showed up in person. That puts a lot more at risk than anonymous threats." Jimmy considered this, weighing impossible options against a ticking clock. "What's your name?" "Elliot. Elliot Chen." "Well, Elliot Chen," Jimmy extended his hand. "I think we both have a lot to lose if this goes wrong." Their handshake sealed an unlikely alliance, neither fully trusting the other, but both recognizing the necessity of cooperation. As they parted ways, agreeing to communicate through secure channels Elliot would establish, both men carried the weight of exposure, Jimmy to public scandal, Elliot to legal consequences. What neither yet realized was how this forced collaboration would shift their understanding of value, vulnerability, and the true currency of reputation in a world where privacy had become the ultimate luxury. The green room of The Tonight Show provided an odd sanctuary, a space designed for comfort but temporary occupancy, much like the fame it facilitated. Jimmy sat alone, 20 minutes before showtime, his usual pre-show ritual disrupted by the quiet ping of the secure messaging app Elliot had configured. Located source of breach, not what we expected. Call when you can. Jimmy glanced at his watch. The timing was impossible. He'd be on air in minutes, then immediately into post-show obligations. Sending a quick response, he typed, "Can't call until after midnight. What should I know now?" The three dots of an incoming reply pulsed for several seconds. The hack originated from inside NBC's network. "This is an inside job, Jimmy." The words landed like a physical blow. Someone within his professional home, his daily community, was behind this. The betrayal added a new dimension to an already complex threat. Before he could process further, his producer appeared at the door. "2 minutes, Jimmy. Jennifer's ready when you are." "Thanks. Be right there," he replied, muscle memory of professionalism masking his internal turmoil. Tucking the phone away, he rolled his shoulders back and focused on the immediate task, being Jimmy Fallon, America's cheerful companion through late-night television, while navigating a personal crisis invisible to his audience. The show proceeded flawlessly. He laughed with Jennifer Lawrence about her misadventures on set, played a ridiculous game involving water balloons and trivia questions, and introduced the weekend with genuine enthusiasm. The audience would never suspect that beneath each segment, a secondary narrative of betrayal and vulnerability played out in his mind. Across the city, Elliot worked with methodical precision, tracing IP addresses and access patterns through the complex digital architecture of NBC's network. The elegant complexity of the breach had initially suggested an external professional, but the evidence now painted a different picture. Someone with authorized access who knew exactly where to look. The list of suspects narrowed to those with both technical ability and specific knowledge of Jimmy's communication history. What troubled Elliot most was the increasingly personal nature of the attack. The blackmailer's focus on the Winters conversations suggested a motivation beyond money. Someone wanted to inflict specific damage to a carefully rebuilt relationship. Near midnight, as promised, his phone rang. "It's past the deadline," Jimmy said without preamble, his voice tight with controlled stress. They sent another message. "Decision time. No new payment details, no explicit threat. Just those 2 words." "They're playing psychological games," Elliot observed, "creating uncertainty about what happens next and when. Classic manipulation tactic." "Knowing that doesn't help me decide what to do," Jimmy replied, fatigue evident in his voice. "You said it's someone inside NBC. How sure are you?" 95%, Elliot confirmed. "The access patterns, the server knowledge. This is someone familiar with the network's architecture and your daily routine. They knew exactly when you would be most vulnerable and distracted." A weighted silence filled the connection before Jimmy spoke again. "I've been thinking about what you said in the park, about understanding motivation. This feels personal, not just opportunistic." "I agree," Elliot said. "The focus on Winters, specifically, rather than any of the other potentially embarrassing content on your phone. Someone wants to target that relationship particularly. But why now? Marcus and I reconciled privately months ago. We're even discussing a potential new project together." The casual mention of a new collaboration triggered something in Elliot's analytical mind, a connection previously overlooked. "Wait, is this project public knowledge?" "No, Jimmy replied slowly, realization dawning in his voice. "We've only discussed it with a few key people at the network. It would be officially announced next month." "That's it." Elliot's fingers flew across his keyboard, pulling up NBC's organizational structure. Who knew about both the new project and would have access to the technical systems? "That narrows it to a handful of people," Jimmy said. "Senior producers, network executives, maybe IT leadership. And who among those would benefit from derailing of Fallon Winter's project?" Another pause, longer this time. "There's one possibility. Sarah Winters, related to Marcus, his daughter. She's a digital content producer at NBC, talented, ambitious, and complicated relationship with her father. She's been pitching her own late-night concept for months." The name registered immediately in Elliot's memory, the same Sarah mentioned in the messages the blackmailer had referenced. "She would have both motive and opportunity," he observed. "Professional advancement if your project fails, emotional leverage against her father, technical access through her position. But blackmail?" Jimmy sounded unconvinced. "That's several steps beyond professional competition." "Digital crimes create emotional distance," Elliot explained, thinking of his own ethical rationalizations. "Behind a screen, escalation happens in increments that seem individually justifiable. Each step is just code, just exploration, until suddenly you're doing something you never thought yourself capable of." The insight hung between them, a hacker's confession wrapped in analysis. "So what now?" Jimmy asked finally. "Do I confront her? Go to network security? The deadline has passed, and I have a show to host tomorrow, regardless of what personal drama is unfolding." Elliot considered the options, weighing ethical and practical considerations. Confrontation without proof could backfire dramatically, and if she feels cornered, she might release the conversations out of spite rather than for payment. "So we need proof." "We need more than proof," Elliot corrected. "We need leverage. The same psychological dynamics that led her to blackmail make direct confrontation risky. She needs to believe releasing the information hurts her more than helping her." Jimmy absorbed this. The complexities of human motivation and digital vulnerability converging into an impossible knot of personal and professional risk. "I'm not comfortable manipulating anyone, even a blackmailer," he said finally. "There has to be another approach." "There is," Elliot said after a moment of contemplation. "But it requires something potentially more difficult than confrontation." "What's that?" "Radical transparency." The two words hung in the digital space between them, a concept antithetical to celebrity culture and the carefully constructed personas of public figures. Yet in a moment where privacy had been weaponized, perhaps its voluntary surrender was the only remaining move. As they outlined the framework of this unexpected strategy, both men recognized they were venturing into territory where traditional power dynamics no longer applied. In the digital age, control over one's narrative came not from perfect concealment, but from strategic revelation. The plan they developed over the next hour would require Jimmy to risk his carefully maintained public image, Elliot to step from digital shadows into potential legal jeopardy, and both to trust that authenticity might prove more powerful than manipulation in a culture built on carefully crafted illusions. The Tonight Show studio hummed with the particular energy that preceded taping. Audience members settled into their seats with the excited anticipation of witnesses to a nightly ritual of celebrity and comedy. Production staff moved with practiced efficiency, last-minute adjustments creating the illusion of effortless entertainment that would be broadcast to millions. In his dressing room, Jimmy sat unusually still, the familiar pre-show adrenaline now mingled with a different kind of tension. On the small table beside him lay two phones, his personal device and a burner Elliot had configured for secure communication. The burner lit up with a message. "Everything in place. Server access secured. Ready when you are." Jimmy typed. Back. No sign of hesitation, no new threats. Nothing. She's waiting for your response to decision time. Confidence suggests she believes you have no countermove. Taking a deep breath, Jimmy replied with a single word. Proceed. A knock at the door signaled 5 minutes to showtime. As he made his way to the stage, Jimmy felt the strange calm that sometimes accompanied the most difficult decisions. The plan was risky, professionally and personally exposing, but it offered something the blackmail situation had stripped away: agency. The show began with its familiar formula: the energetic entrance, the monologue crafted to transform daily. News into gentle comedy, the playful banter with the band. Watching from the back of the studio, Sarah Winters maintained a professional smile, digital tablet in hand, as she monitored social media engagement in real time, unaware that her own digital footprints were now being monitored with equal attention. Midway through the show, after the second commercial break, Jimmy's demeanor shifted subtly as he turned to the camera. "We're going to do something a little different tonight," he began, his tone shifting from entertainment to conversation. "Most nights, I come out here and we laugh together about the absurdities of life, celebrity mishaps, and whatever bizarre headline made the news. But today, I find myself in my own headline, one that hasn't been published yet." A murmur ran through the audience, the energy in the room transforming from entertainment to curiosity. "Someone has hacked my phone," Jimmy continued, "and is threatening to release private conversations if I don't pay $500,000. Pretty standard celebrity blackmail, except for one detail. These aren't embarrassing photos or celebrity gossip. They're conversations with my former writing partner, Marcus Winters." In the production area, Sarah's posture stiffened, her attention now fully captured by the unexpected pivot. "Marcus and I had a falling out years ago that became something of industry legend," Jimmy explained. "Things were said that neither of us meant, accusations thrown that we both regretted. And privately, over the past year, we've managed to rebuild not just a professional relationship, but a friendship I deeply value." On cue, from stage left, Marcus Winters emerged to surprised applause. The tall, silver-haired producer approached with the measured confidence of someone accustomed to working behind the camera, rather than in front of it. The two men exchanged a brief embrace before both took seats. "Marcus has graciously agreed to join me tonight," Jimmy explained, "because we've decided that the best response to blackmail isn't payment or panic. It's taking control of our own narrative." Marcus leaned toward his microphone. "When Jimmy called me yesterday about this situation, my first instinct was damage control. Then he suggested something that initially sounded crazy. What if we simply acknowledge our past conflict ourselves, on our own terms?" In the production booth, Elliot watched multiple screens, one showing the broadcast, another monitoring Sarah's increasingly agitated movements, and a third displaying the digital evidence being compiled in real time as she frantically accessed servers from her tablet. On stage, Jimmy turned to Marcus. "So let's talk about Midnight Hour, the show concept we fought over all those years ago. The failed project that ended our partnership." Marcus nodded, a rueful smile softening his features. "I was convinced you'd stolen my concept. You were equally convinced I was undermining your creative input. We were both young, ambitious, and terrified of failure," Jimmy added. "And instead of working through it, we let it destroy not just the project, but our friendship." As their conversation unfolded with surprising candor, the audience witnessed something rarely seen in celebrity culture: genuine vulnerability without the protective layer of self-deprecating humor or carefully crafted anecdotes. Too successful. Men acknowledging professional jealousy, insecurity, and the messy reality of creative collaboration. In the production area, Sarah stood frozen, her planned leverage evaporating with each minute of broadcast transparency. The private conversations being threatened for release were being voluntarily contextualized before her eyes, transformed from potential scandal to humanizing narrative. Simultaneously, on her tablet, a message appeared from an unknown number. "We know it's you, Sarah. The server access, the timing, everything. But this isn't about exposing you. It's about offering a better way forward. Meet us after the show. Jimmy's office." On stage, Jimmy was explaining their new collaboration, a project that would blend Marcus's production expertise with the Tonight Show platform, creating opportunities for emerging comedic writers. "And speaking of new voices," he added, in a seemingly improvised aside, "we're particularly excited about including perspectives from the next generation of content creators, people who understand how digital media is reshaping entertainment." The pointed reference wasn't lost on Sarah, whose expression shifted from panic to confusion as she realized the trap closing around her had an unexpected escape hatch built into its design. As the show concluded to enthusiastic applause, the carefully choreographed confrontation moved to its final setting, Jimmy's office, where Elliot waited with Marcus. When Sarah arrived, her posture reflected defiance tinged with resignation. "Impressive counter-move," she acknowledged, looking between the three men. "Public confession beats private exposure. I should have anticipated that." "This was never about beating you," Jimmy said quietly. "We're not pressing charges. We're not reporting this to NBC security. Instead, we want to understand why." The directness of the question seemed to catch her off guard. "You really don't know? You and my father decide to collaborate to create yet another platform that celebrates the same voices that have always been heard, while innovative digital concepts get sidelined as not ready for prime time." Marcus stepped forward. "Sarah, I never rejected your ideas because they weren't valid. I distanced myself from them because I was trying not to show favoritism. So instead you showed active opposition," she countered. "Do you know what it's like trying to establish yourself in your father's industry where every accomplishment is dismissed as nepotism, while every failure is entirely your own?" The raw honesty hung in the air, the complex dynamics of family, creative ambition, and professional identity laid bare. Elliot, watching from the sidelines, recognized in her frustration echoes of his own experiences. Talent without opportunity, potential without platform. "Your digital content strategy for NBC's late-night programming was impressive," Jimmy said after a moment. "Particularly the interactive elements that traditional producers dismissed." Sarah's surprise at the specific reference was evident. "You read my proposal?" "I did. After we identified you as our likely hacker, I wanted to understand the motivation beyond the obvious. Your work deserves consideration on its merits, not dismissal because it challenges conventional formats. Which is why," Marcus added carefully, "we'd like you to join our new project, not as my daughter or Jimmy's staff, but as digital strategy lead with creative input on content development." The offer hung in the air, neither bribe nor punishment, but recognition of her talents, her frustrations, and the legitimate grievances that had been channeled into destructive action. "Why would you trust me after this?" Sarah asked. The question directed at Jimmy. "Trust is earned in both directions," he replied. "You have every reason to be skeptical of this industry and the people in it, including me. But creating something worthwhile requires taking risks on ideas and on people." The resolution wasn't neat or immediate. Trust damaged couldn't be instantly restored, but as they outlined preliminary terms for both professional collaboration and personal boundaries, a framework emerged for moving forward that acknowledged both the harm done and the possibility of redemption. Later that night, after the others had left, Jimmy and Elliot remained in the office, the unlikely alliance of celebrity and hacker, now transitioning toward its conclusion. "Your access to my systems ends tonight," Jimmy said, not unkindly. But your insights about digital security and human motivation, those are valuable beyond this crisis. Elliot nodded, understanding the boundary being established. Some skills are better applied to building than breaking. NBC's cybersecurity team has openings, Jimmy offered. No promises, but I could make an introduction. Your technical abilities are obvious, and your ethical compass, while occasionally questionable, seems fundamentally sound. The offer represented more than employment. It was legitimacy, the opportunity to redirect talents honed in digital shadows toward constructive purpose. The most secure systems, Elliot observed, are designed by people who understand how they might be broken. As they parted ways, both men carried lessons from their unexpected collaboration. Jimmy, about the vulnerability inherent in digital life and the power of controlled transparency. Elliot, about the human consequences of technical decisions and the possibility of professional redemption. The hacking that had begun as an invasion of privacy had paradoxically created connections across digital and personal divides, revealing that in a world of carefully maintained public personas, authentic vulnerability might be the most powerful security system of all.